Hi friends, thanks so much for joining us. We're in the middle of a health crisis, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually, I think, as well. And this is a tough time for all of us. On this program, we're going to kind of continue looking at America's mental, emotional, and social health. We're going to talk about stress with a Seattle firefighter, and wrote a terrific op-ed piece that appeared in the Washington Post. And you're all meeting as I'm meeting Michael Top Washington. Michael, good to say hello to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The work of a firefighter, very, very stressful. And I know as we were talking just a few seconds before we came on the record here, that you say you have about 8 calls a day. And what's the nature of the work of a firefighter now?
Well, you know, it's everything. It's everything that you can imagine. In my early part of my career in Southern California, people would call us to get snakes out of their house. It starts there. It starts with a broken toe. It starts with a car accident, a fire, you know, you name it. Whatever you think is your emergency, you call us.
West Coast has had a horrific time with the fires, huh? You've been out fighting them yourself.
Yes, I was down in Oregon with our urban search and rescue team, searching for, you know, sadly to search for people who didn't make it out of the fires, but I'm happy to report that everybody eventually was accounted for.
I know your background, a couple of decades as a Marine, and a long service, almost 30 years as a firefighter. Why did you want to become a firefighter?
Well, you know, I come from a family of service, and some of the pictures in the background is the lineage of my family. My uncle Donald Ladder with the Canadian Armored Regiment in France in World War II. My wife's grandfather was a Marine who was killed on Okinawa in World War II, and my father was a Marine. My brother's a Marine. My daughter's a soldier. My son-in-law's a soldier. It's on and on and on. So service is just something that you do in our family. And being a firefighter was an extension of my active duty service, of the camaraderie, doing those things that are important, but not everybody is equipped to do or wants to do, but somebody has to do it. And that's how I went from the active duty Marine Corps into the fire service. And I stayed in the reserves and continued with them for a total of 23 years.
In the military, you served abroad, huh?
Yes, sir.
Where were your tours of duty?
Well, my first was Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm with the 2nd Light Armored Infantry Battalion, 2nd Marine Division. And then after that, I went into the counterintelligence field where I served in Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa.
And right out of high school, you went into the Marines. And
yes.
and then you come full circle and you join firefighters. You have been living under a lot of stress. I mean, that's the nature of the game. You know, military, firefighters, law enforcement, backgrounds. It's nothing but stress, stress, stress.
No, that's true, and I think it depends on how you look at it. But yes, certainly it's stressful. But if you were to ask me what was the most stressful thing I've ever dealt with as a professional, I would say working the drive-through at Church's Fried Chicken in Kansas City when I worked there as a side job back in the 80s when I was stationed there. Hungry people wanting their food right now, that is stress.
Wow, and that's a terrific answer. Looking at you now through a lens, and you're on the other side of the country, this bat cave, this man cave, this atmosphere of all of these pictures and mementos that surround you, rather comforting, huh?
It is. It's good to be around the spirit, if you will, of my family and my love of history, military history, and you know, study, and yeah, it is. It's just a great place for me to just come and be.
Top, let's take a little break right now and come back on the other side. This is America and the World. Underwriting for This is America and the World is made possible by the National Association for Children of Addiction, Faces and Voices of Recovery, the Forerunner Foundation, the Rotondaro Family Trust, the Sultanate of Oman, the Kingdom of Morocco, and the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy. What brought us together was this incredible op-ed piece you wrote in the Washington Post with the headline, "I'm a veteran who was suicidal. It's a good thing I didn't have a gun." Tell me a little bit about June 14th, 2008.
Well, I retired from the Marine Corps in 2008 from the reserves, and I was a Seattle firefighter. And I was working at Fire Station 16 in the Green Lake area of Seattle. It was a gorgeous Seattle day, just magnificent day. And I was pretty excited. It was overtime. I was working with a good crew. We promised that we were going to have a really great dinner that night, so I was really happy. And we got dispatched for a call. And as I was getting ready to get on the rig, my best friend in the fire department suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He just pulled right up on the ramp. And instead of talking to me, he talked to the officer, and he said, "We're out of service. We're out of service." It was very peculiar to have that happen. And then a split second later, I saw a white Marine Corps Suburban pull up with two Marines in the front seat and my wife at the time in the back seat. And I knew right then and there that they had come to tell me that my son had been killed in action in Afghanistan. From there, trying to keep it together all my life and ignoring things, and the stresses all came home at once to roost, and that started me on a slow but very steady spiral that sped up as it went on until I found myself on a bridge ready to go over.
So probably drinking?
Oh yeah, well, that's another thing too. I grew up in a family of drinking. And I grew up in a culture of drinking. Even family shows like Bewitched would show Darren magically being transformed if he had a martini when he got home from work. So when you were happy, you drank. When you were sad, you drank. When you were angry, you drank. Drinking was just a part of it. And then the Marine Corps culture at the time was the same way. It was just, this is what we do. All of my mentors in the Marine Corps were Vietnam, Korea, and even the commandant of the Marine Corps was a World War II veteran. And these are guys who don't talk about their feelings. This is Gunny Highway on Clint Eastwood's movie, Heartbreak Ridge. It was those guys, hard drinking, hard fighting, just deal with your stuff. So I fell right into that. I was really good at drinking and drank a lot. And then the response mechanism of the fire service and the military after such an event like losing your son is, let's have a drink and just remember the good times. It was a continuous wake. It was just a very long wake. And and I was, drinking so I could sleep, but I didn't want to sleep because the nightmares would come. And really all these things I kept pent up going from childhood through the fire service, through my tours overseas, all came home at once.
Tell me about your son.
Oh, Michael was just a good kid. He was a regular kid, good kid, never any problems with him. When I went overseas, especially when he became a preteen and a teenager, he was the man of the house, and he took that job seriously, and he would take care of business. And his mother and I really wanted him to go to college, but when his sister went in the Army, we knew that there's no way that he's going to go to college while his sister is in the Army. And we were driving on a trip down to Southern California after I came back from my last tour, and we were listening to an NPR broadcast about the fighting in Fallujah. And at the end of it, something just struck me, and I looked at him and I said, "Son, you're going to go in the Marines after you get out of high school, aren't you?" And he kind of sheepishly looked at me and said, yeah, Dad. And I said, okay, well, why do you want to do that? You have choices. You can do anything you want. And he said that, Dad, there's people in the world who need to be protected. And sometimes that protection is somebody who is a Marine or is a soldier, and I want to be that person to offer that protection. And despite my misgivings and my fears and everything else, with an answer like that, I couldn't help but be proud of the young man that he was turning into. And and despite all my fears and trepidations, I had to give my blessing to his service.
When you walked to the bridge and you were contemplating suicide, and the headline in the Post says, yes, you were a veteran, but you say, thank God I didn't have a gun at the time. What caused you to step back from the bridge? What caused you to say, no, I'm not going to do this?
Well, I wish I could take credit for having a moment of clarity, but to be honest with you and all your listeners, it was my son. It was my son's presence that stopped me and said, Dad, this is not where it ends. Your story does not end here. And that was, it was a physical moment for me. I can't explain it. I give you a scientific rationale for what exactly happened, but when I was just teetering, it was him. And it was him who stopped me. His voice, his spirit, his being. I 100% no doubt about that. And that's what happened.
Let's look at the other piece of the pie where you say in the piece that ran in the Post, thank God I didn't have a gun. And you're a military man. You're a military man.
I am.
Your whole family. Thank
Yes.
God I didn't have a gun. Do you think if you had a gun, you might have committed suicide?
Absolutely. There's no question. There's no question in my mind. And here's the issue, is that when you're at your darkest, deepest depth of sorrow and despair, there's you think of the various ways that someone can take their lives. They take steps. They take a number of steps to do. And even midway through these steps, you can stop it. You can call. You can take pills, and then you can call 911 and say, hey, I did this, and it can be reversed. For me and for a lot of veterans, I think is having a weapon at the ready, easily accessible, combined with alcohol, combined with that moment of despair that you're in, that moment of where you're just so sad and you have no way to get out, that the alcohol and the weapon will cause you to do something that you cannot take back. It's so instantaneous, it's so permanent, and that's it. There's nothing happens after that, after you use a weapon. So that's why I say, had I owned a weapon, and I've never owned a weapon. I've never owned a weapon in my life. I've used weapons exactly what they're meant for, and I enjoy shooting. I enjoy the physical presence of body control, mind control, to put a projectile downrange and put it in a target, a paper target, and then trying to do it again. It's a mind, body, spirit exercise that I enjoy, but I've never had the need or the feeling for myself to have a weapon. I don't hunt. I'm from the city all my life, so I don't hunt. I don't have one for protection. I have police and a dog for that. So it's never been part of my culture. And I understand that half of the Marine Corps is from Texas. So a lot of my friends are gun enthusiasts, and I appreciate that, and I love that about them. And I definitely am not talking about taking their weapons away from them at all. I'm just saying we need some kind of mechanism in place that when we know a brother or a sister is in that moment, in that sea of despair, that we have something that we can do to lessen that chance of suicide by gun. Whether it's provide a safe for them where we have the combination, but they still have their guns there so they can have that feeling, or we have the conversation beforehand and say, hey, Dennis, let me hold your guns for you until we get you some help. And then when you're back, man, I'll be the first guy to go shooting with you. Looks like, but just something to stop that one moment that I'm so glad I didn't have that moment in time, because I would not be here talking to you right now.
couple of articles that I've read recently suggest that during this pandemic period of time, that teenagers, one out of four teenagers has had some thoughts about suicide during the pandemic. And then you read the articles about children who have access to guns, you know, who are going through the same period of time. We have to be very, very cautious. Also, an article I read that suggests that there are more suicides amongst veterans, in rural areas, even amongst law enforcement. So what we're talking about here, what message and what, from your own personal experience, what would you say?
Well, I would say that if we can do anything to lessen, to save one person, let's just start with one person, whether it's a teenager, a veteran, police officer, firefighter, news anchor, doesn't matter. If we can save one person by having some kind of application where they don't have a ready access to guns when they are in those moments of despair, I say, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that 100%. You know, when we talk about deaths in rural areas, I mean, that's isolation. And that's a huge component of suicide, is there's nobody here for me. I can't talk to anybody. I can't share with anybody. That's a huge component of this. The gun is, for law enforcement and veterans, oftentimes is very symbolic. I lived by the gun, I die by the gun. Right now, I'm beginning my career as a therapist, and you're right, the stress of this pandemic touches every single person in the world, So you can be a law enforcement officer and you're gonna go deal with other people's emergencies. You can be a firefighter dealing with other people's emergencies, but you are also touched by this pandemic and all the stress. And when will it end? Will it end? What's gonna happen next? We don't know. We have no clear direction here, but we're under siege. And we all feel that siege happening to us and our families. And so we have to be cognizant that this is happening to all of us, and that we're all susceptible to the stresses that this pandemic, the social upheaval, the political upheaval, this touches everybody. I don't think anybody can sit back and say, no, I'm good. We're all touched. Every one of us is touched with it. And if you already have these other stressors, whether it started in childhood or in your career as a law enforcement or a firefighter or a veteran, well, now you have another one, and your family's under that same burden as well. So let's do something about it.
What turned you around from a marriage that was obviously falling apart, all this drinking, approaching suicide? What turned you around, and what message do you have for men in particular to you know, I'm good to go, macho men who are too afraid to ask for help? All yours.
Well, for me, first of all, getting off that bridge and understanding, okay, let's think of something else. Going to a retreat with an organization called Save a Warrior was very helpful to me to talk about aspects of my life I hadn't considered before, including childhood, to help understand where I am. Therapy was another one at the vet center here in Tacoma. You know, my therapist was very good and was there for me to open up. And so those were key things that allowed me to learn more about it and what really was occurring with me and seeking help. The drinking, I couldn't tell you what made me stop it. I just think I just lost interest in it. I just had better things, you know, my marriage is awesome. You know, my kids, my grandkids, there's just a lot better things in my life right now. And I think for me, how I got there in the first place is a generation of machismo. As I said, my mentors in the fire service and in the Marines were manly men, tough guys, you know, tough guys who often committed suicide when they retired, or, you know, just went down the pit of alcoholism, domestic violence, things like that, you know, all those bad things, you know, certainly not everybody, but a lot, more than we should. And you wanted to be those guys, you wanted to be the tough guy. And you got it. I do disaster relief work with an organization called Team Rubicon that was started by one of the friends of my son, Jake Wood and William McNulty, both veterans. And so, I add that onto my plate of despair and bad things that you see when you go on a disaster. And I do peer support work in the fire department, and I throw that on my plate too. But I think I have broad enough shoulders to handle it until I didn't, and I found myself on the bridge, ready to go. I just didn't have it anymore. My message for other guys, men and women out there, of all walks of life, but especially guys, because I understand your question, is that if you take a look at me, and you take a look at my life that's represented behind me, my children, my career, my lineage, I think you owe it to yourself to just put up your hand. It's easy. It's easy to put up your hand and take those steps. Now the steps are hard. I'm not going to say it was easy. And there was other things that were dredged up in my conversations with therapists that were not easy. But where I am now, I am a much better husband, father, grandfather, co-worker. I'm just a better version of Mike Washington. That's what people tell me. So it's not just me tooting my own horn. Feel better. And now I want to help other veterans, firefighters, people in general. You don't have to go through what I went through. You don't have to. And I will talk to you just like we're talking right now. I'm not going to throw big words at you. I'm not going to say, no, I understand what you're going through, because I went through something very similar. And here's how we get out of it. Here's the things that we do. And just walk alongside of them.
You're connected with an organization called Everytown. Tell me a little bit about Everytown and their difference in underlining the idea of gun violence versus gun control.
Exactly right? Nobody likes that idea of gun control or taking away the Second Amendment rights. And Everytown really just espouses the idea of more sensible gun laws. Where are these gaps? How are we able to say, that doesn't make any sense. Let's stop this, or let's change it. Let's talk about it. Let's just talk about it. Let's start there before we start, getting into the name calling and everything else. And the organization that I work with is the veterans group of Moms Demand Action in Everytown. And so as veterans, as people who understand and appreciate guns and their lethality, and we can bring to the table what we learned in the military, right? That you have to be trained and you are accountable for this weapon. This is not a toy. This is not something to just be left laying around. And so when we speak as somebody who's handled weapons before, people tend to hear us a little bit more. It buys a few more minutes of somebody who would normally not want to hear any of this rhetoric. Well, okay, this guy's handled a weapon before. Okay, I'll listen to him a little bit more. And then just, again, have the conversation and then help change minds. Not take away guns. Not take away somebody's right to go to the range or to have a gun for protection if that's what they want to do. But for veterans or anybody who's in distress, let's have a conversation about how do we stop them from killing themselves with a gun that they have in their house? What can we do? Let's have the conversation. Again, gun safe? Okay, cool. Or perhaps I'll hold your guns for you. Or maybe there's a red flag law, whatever it looks like. There's just a lot of ways we can do this, but it's hard to have a conversation on this. And Everytown, Moms Demand Action, and the Veterans Action Committee, I think, do a really, really good job of saying, let's talk about this. I'm a veteran, I have a gun, I like guns, so I don't want anybody to take them away either. But let's see how we can start saving some lives here. And that's the crux.
Michael Top Washington, where's the top come from?
Well, in the Marine Corps, a master sergeant is referred to either as master sergeant or affectionately as top. And I think it goes back to the days of the top sergeant. And so now it's just down as top. And Chris Marvin, who's part of the Everytown group, we went on a Team Rubicon deployment to Houston, Texas a couple years ago. And I'm referred to as top in the organization. So that's how he introduces me. So, and I like it. It's fun. It reminds me of the Marine Corps, and it begs questions like where did top come from?
Thank you, Michael Top Washington. Thank you, Top. Good to be with you. Thank you for educating our viewers just a terrific conversation. Thanks so much.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking to you again.
Everytown for Gun Safety is the largest gun violence prevention organization in the United States. If you are in crisis or know someone who is, these resources offer immediate help. For information about This Is America and the World, visit our website, thisisamerica.net, or our YouTube channel, This Is America TV, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Underwriting for This Is America and the World is made possible by the National Association for Children of Addiction, Faces and Voices of Recovery, the Forerunner Foundation, the Rotondaro Family Trust, the Sultanate of Oman, the Kingdom of Morocco, and the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy.